pry all that gunk right off, and I'm going to do the same thing carefully on the GPU here.
Tales of weird stuff. Voices. An army of GameCubes.
In this video and the follow-up, I'm going to do something a little bit different from what I usually do. Instead of playing around with old computers, I'm going to play around with some old video game systems. Specifically, in this video, I'm going to install the PicoBoot mod in all 4 of these GameCubes. That modding on all 4 of these is to support the next video where I'm going to do a fun project that I'm very excited about. I did a version of this project back in 2016, and which was way before I had a YouTube channel. And I want to recreate that project, but I want to turn it up to 11 a little bit, at least as much as I can. So I'm going to do the mods on this. It's also why I bought some of those video cables at PRGE last month. This video should be coming out on, I want to say, either Friday, November 17th or Saturday, November 18th. On Sunday, November 19th at 2 p.m. Pacific, I'm going to live stream on Twitch what my project is with these 4 GameCubes. And I'm very excited about it. Now, there will be a follow-up video on YouTube where I'm going to show how I'm going to set everything up with these and what I'm actually doing with it. And there will be some very condensed game footage. I'm going to have a few people over, and we're probably going to stream on Twitch for 3 or 4 or 100 hours until we get tired of it. Installing this PicoBoot mod involves a moderate amount of for my skill level, fairly dicey soldering. I am not good at soldering. I don't particularly enjoy it. I've never made any secret of that. So hopefully this will go without too much drama. Let's get right into it then.
The first step, and most certainly the easiest step of this whole process, is programming the Raspberry Pi Pico with the correct firmware. Now, I'm just following the instructions from the PicoBoot website. I did one of the 4 modules, and the hardest part of doing it was finding the right USB cable in my house. That took a minute. So just hold down the little button and plug it in. And it should appear. Okay, so it appeared on my desktop. Now, I'm not a drag and drop kind of guy. I'm a command line sort of guy. I already downloaded the PicoBoot UF2, and then just copy it on, and it takes a little bit, and when it's done, a green light will appear on here, and then, oh, there it goes. It's done. That's it. Boom. All right. Now that I've done it a few times, I'll walk through the process for this last one. The disassembly is pretty easy. It's a little bit annoying. Now, it does require a game bit a video game security bit, a Nintendo bit, goes by a bunch of different names. There are 2 sizes of these bits. I don't remember. Does mine say on it? It does not. There are 2 different sizes. This is the larger bit. It is needed to remove the 4 screws in the bottom that keep the whole thing together. And then once these screws are removed, you just need a small Phillips head screwdriver for all of the other screws. And boy, howdy, are there a lot of other screws. I don't know what my emotion was. Impressed? Confused? Something? Annoyed? Maybe all of the above. With just... Oh, come on. Don't be like that. With just how many screws there are... Why is this one... There it goes. How many screws there are inside here. Now, once the top is lifted off, there's little... Whoa, this is really dirty inside. There are little plastic clips on these bits, so you can pop this out carefully. Now, that looks like that could use some cleaning. Interesting. Now, if I'd have been thinking when I started on this project, I would have ordered batteries and little battery holders, and I would replace all the batteries in these. This is all the further that it would need to be disassembled to get at the battery. I mean, these screws here would need to be taken out to get at that. I'm going to do that later. So there's a clip-on thing on the back and in the front. Those can be set aside. And then what I was doing was taking off this little fan and power supply connector assembly and setting that off to the side. And it's a little bit, it can be a little bit finicky to get out, but it also, why is it? And it slides out. And then, oh, someone has been in here before because there is a screw missing there. Interesting. And then it's just the matter of going around and taking out all the other 12 screws along the side here. And then, oh wait, maybe that one was the one that, was that the one I just took out there? Anyway, wow, this one is filthy. I actually don't know 100% if this one works because I thought I only had 4 of the DOL-001 GameCubes, but it turns out I have 5, so it's entirely possible that this one has some issues, which I guess before I go too much further, I should test it. I may do that off camera. Oh my god, so many screws. Wow, this one is filthy. The other ones were a little bit dusty inside, and the cases are a little bit dirty. I'm going to take this opportunity while they are all fully disassembled to take the shells over to the sink and wash them. I also plan... Look at this pot. So those are the 4 security bits, and then this is just the mountain of other screws. But wait, there's more. Now with these, when I first took out the first few of these, I really struggled to try to get the screws to come out. And of course now they're both going to come out. But if they don't come out, you know, if you don't have a magnetic tip screwdriver or whatever, or it just doesn't come out like that one just did. See, it's still hanging out in there. Just pull it all out with this little metal thing. Don't stress about it. And then that just comes right on off, and the part on the DOL-001 models, the 101 models are a little bit different, and the installation instructions are somewhat different, but this is the only area that we need access to, so it doesn't need to be disassembled any more than this. There's going to be, I want to say, 5 wires that get soldered onto this. First they're going to get soldered onto the Picos, solder them onto here, and then I need to check. There were very specific instructions about where to install the Pico inside the unit, and I need to double check that. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of the fan assembly I suspect so that it could get some cooling. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm going to take all the removed plastic over to the sink, wash it, and start it drying. And then I'm going to come back and I will start soldering on the Picos. There's the wires that need soldering onto this, and the recommendation is to use 26 gauge wire, and all I had was 24. It's going to be a little bit thicker, but I think that it should be okay. I'm not super worried about it. It needs to look at the window. Needs to be soldered onto 2 onto this side. Well, 3 onto this side, and 2 of the pins need to be bridged. And then 2 on this side. So I am going to go through and I'm going to cut a bunch of, looking at it, I think, looking at the system. So what it recommended, and there's another step that I left out that I'm debating about whether or not I'm going to do. There is some further disassembly. It does recommend removing the heatsink and replacing the thermal pad that's on it, and I did order thermal pad, so I have the stuff to do that. I'm in here. I may as well go ahead and do it. So what the recommendation is to mount. It says to mount on the fan assembly behind the front controller interface. So I'm assuming that's like in this neighborhood. So I'm looking at it, and I think about 4 inches should give plenty of wire so that I can have it not be a huge hassle while I'm trying to solder onto the board up here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the wires down through the top. So they're going to come out this way. That seems to be the sensible way to do it that will line up. My soldering iron is on. And I'm going to just go ahead and do this. And yeah. I'm gonna get started, and again I'm gonna do this in fast forward and then do the last one at regular speed and talk about what I learned on the first 3.
Much to my surprise, installing the first mod was a piece of cake. It just worked the first time, and I think I got a little too confident after that. Installation of the next 2 mods was just shy of total disaster. And for that reason, there was some of the work that I did not even record. And there's a big chunk of other work that has been edited out for everyone's benefit. I had a lot of difficulty soldering. I ran out of flux and I had to get more flux, and I think the stuff that I got wasn't in the best condition, but it was certainly better than nothing, and I definitely have to give thanks to my friends over at Surplus Gizmos out in the Hillsborough area for hooking me up with some flux that they had. Otherwise this would have been a full-on total disaster instead of just almost. So the installation of the next 2 mods was both figuratively and literally painful because I burned myself a couple of times. One thing that I think that I forget to mention later on in the video when I'm installing the last mod is get the finer gauge wire. Having 26 gauge instead of 24 gauge would have made soldering the 2 wires onto the small IC especially much easier. But after I finally got everything installed, it wouldn't boot into Swiss. It just behaved as if the mod was not installed at all. The GameCube still worked fine, but just no mod. I looked at all my soldering very carefully, checked over everything with the little magnifier mask that I use, and I could not see any problems. Now, there was a problem. I looked right past it. I looked right at it and didn't see it as a problem. I do talk about that later on. So I started to second guess myself that, well, did I forget to install the firmware on the Raspberry Pis? Okay, well, that's annoying because apparently there is an issue where if you try to re-flash the firmware on the Raspberry Pi while it's connected into a GameCube, it can send some voltage out or something bad can happen and it can damage your GameCube. So in order to check to make sure that I had installed the firmware on them, I had to remove the Raspberry Pis, hook them up to the computer. And this is where I discovered a very annoying thing that once the firmware is installed, it doesn't show up as a file when you connect the Pi to a computer. So you can't tell what's installed on it. And if you're trying to check, is there anything installed on it? It's not very helpful. So I, uninstalled them, reflashed the firmware onto all three of the ones that hadn't been installed. And I did it a couple times just to make sure. Hooked it back up, and it still would not boot into Swiss. And that was the point where I was very frustrated. And I turned off the cameras because I knew that while I was doing the troubleshooting after that, there was going to be some spicy language. It was not going to be suitable for YouTube. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the heck I did wrong. And, I did eventually find the actual problem. And I felt very foolish when I discovered it because it was a case of actually read the instructions all the way through. Anyway, okay. Back to past me talking.
Okay. So now, hopefully, I've made all of my mistakes. And I'm going to walk through doing the last one, doing it live. You're welcome, Matt. So it is very important to remove the heatsink. Do not pry the heatsink off. It's an advice in the instructions. They make a very big point of this. It is, yes. And the reason is because you can crack the board. There's a lot of components that you can't see. So if you go and, shove something in here and try to pry it up, you might damage one of those components and then all is lost. So what you do with this kind, because they use this sort of gummy, I don't know what that stuff is. It's kind of, it feels gross. So you kind of wiggle it back and forth and we'll see. Oh, this one's going to come off pretty easy, I think. Some of them come off pretty easy, like that one. Others do not. If it does not come off easy, especially with it completely open up like this, just plug it in and turn it on for just a couple of minutes. Keep checking it. And when you can start to feel that the heatsink is very warm but not uncomfortably hot, turn it off, unplug it, and just that amount of heat will have softened this gunk up, and then it comes right off. There was one of the previous two was like that. The heatsink did not want to come off. And then I just have a little scraping tool that I got for, I don't know, $1 at some hardware store to just blurp, pry all that gunk right off. And I'm going to do the same thing carefully on the GPU here. Remove that. And then go ahead and hit it with a little bit of alcohol and a washcloth. Get it all nice and butamus and sparkly. Clean up the heatsink too. Okay. We'll return to that. I was I was hoping that was going to be a difficult one to repair, because what I found, or to remove, what I found is that the amount of time that it takes to solder the wires onto the Raspberry Pi is more than enough time for the heatsink to get adequately hot to soften the heatsink compound. Now, for these wires, I found that strip about, so on these I did 1/4 inch, which I want to say is a 1/2 centimeter. No. Yeah, about 1/2 centimeter for 4 of the wires, and then kind of fold them through. I'm not going to zoom in because this is a board. You heard the story already in the voiceover part. It looks really bad. I don't need to show off how bad it looks. When you fold them over, there'll be plenty of, it'll hold on well, and you can clip the excess off later. The 4 that only go through a single hole, the one that goes through the 6 and 7 hole, I did a little bit more. I stripped off about 1/3 of an inch, which is somewhere between a 1/2 centimeter and a centimeter, 3/4 of a centimeter. And then you can clip off these little bits of excess. And now this end is good. Now, the ends that are going to go on the board, what I found is just strip off barely any. On this, I don't even know. Maybe a 1/16 of an inch. I mean, like, I was stripping off, I don't know if this will show up on the camera. I mean, you could barely tell, like, it's just the tiniest amount, because you're trying to get into some pretty tight spaces here. For one, a little bit more than that. For one, and two, one thing that happens is dang it, this one's being, there we go. Oh, it's a little bit too much. Anyway, when you get the hot soldering iron on it, the insulator will kind of shrink back a little bit from the heat, and so you'll get it may not look like much, but it's enough. Okay, so on these, and I'm going to zoom in on this, and hopefully it will focus and play nicely. Okay, so I need to switch windows so I can be able to look at it, because I have to keep checking. So GP4, I like to do GP4 first. I find that GP4, which goes on this side of this chip, and GP6 and 7, which go onto the other side, are the two most difficult. All right, so what I found works the best, and if I'm honest, I would rate my soldering skills as D+, C- if I'm generous. You know, I did burn myself pretty good earlier when I was doing this, so let's you know you're doing it wrong. If it smells like chicken. All right, so and it's the third one in. Get a little bit of, tin this up a little bit, just a smidge. Double check that you're doing the correct wire, or you'll be sad. And I was going to do the incorrect wire. I would have been sad. So on this one, I'm going to try to position it so that I can see it and so that you can see it. I like to do laying over this way. And I'm going to take the wire, and with the tip of the soldering iron, I'm going to try to see, basically going to, oh, and I can already tell I bridged that. Let me solder this and see if I can get it to, I can clean it up. Just push it into the solder. Oh, you dirty dog. Okay, so it's attached, but I think I have bridged multiple of those pins. Okay, I just bridged those two. So that, I think, I can just clean up the tweezers. I don't need to go back in there with the iron. Nope, I need to go in there with the iron. Shoot. So for this, All right, let's see if I can clean this up. Oh man, it is being stub arn per usual. And then of course that happens. Per usual, it's okay. All right, I think. Okay, that seems good. Nope. JK. Remember when I said I was a D+ or C- solderer? I wasn't, I think maybe you need to... Well, it looks like there's still enough solder on there. So bend the wire a little bit to get a little bit of a curve to it, so it will kind of lay down into that leg a little bit more. I think that's good. All right, that seems good. Okay. And then 6 and 7 do the same thing, but kind of going the other way. I'm going to kind of curve that around because I want to, ultimately I want it to be like this. And, oh, you little... So if you think D+ is a generous assessment of my soldering skills, let me know in the comments below. And yes, this is after having done 3 of them, that it's still this challenging for me. Okay. And then 6 and 7. I'm sure my big dumb head is in the way of the desk camera. All right, I think that's good. And now I think I bridged between the other two. If it isn't one thing, it is another. Yeah, for sure. And this is the most important, these two are the most important to get right. Because once the heatsink is back on, you're blocked. You can't make any further changes to them without removing the heatsink again. And one thing that happened to me a couple of times, and let me check that before I continue. Yes, okay, that looks good. One thing that happened to me a couple times was I'd get the heatsink on and move this a little bit, and one of those would blink, come on. I'm like, oh, are you freaking kidding me? Come on. Help a fella out. Come on. Okay. So I like to move from left to right across here. So I'm going to do the 3.3 volt one next, which is this one. And it goes the farthest over here. It goes on that pin right there. So I'm going to do basically the same thing. Hit it with some flux. Tighten this up a little bit here. Get a little bit of solder on there. Get a little bit of solder off of there. Okay. And then, what did I say was 3.3 volts? It's very nicely labeled on the back. At first I was all worried. I was having to like count the pins on the PiZero here and was like really stressing about it. And then I realized, oh yeah, it's just labeled. And then the next one is GP5. Guess what? I'm gonna do the same thing with that. Make sure I do it on the correct one here. Like a little bit of bend in this. Where it's gonna go. That is definitely bridged. Can I just get it with the tweezers, though? Nope. Dang it. Remove too much solder from that pin. These little visor things are, it's a very important tool. They're like $5 or something at Harbor Freight. They're super cheap. Super worth it. Okay, that looks good. Now, here's the part that I botched, that I got right by accident on the first one. And then on the other ones, I couldn't figure out what the heck I was doing wrong and why they weren't working. These two pins here, so let me make sure you can see this. I'm going to zoom way in. All right, that's all the way in. Okay. These two pins right here, this one and that one next to it, need to be bridged together. If you neglect to do that and just solder the ground onto this larger pin, the GameCube will still work, but the mod will not. And you will be for sure in the land of WTF. Why are you not working? Help a fella out. All right, I think that's good. Let me zoom back out a little bit here because I'm going to shove my big dumb head in the way. Check this out. All right, that looks good. So I'm going to carefully bundle those together and kind of bend that up. I'm going to prop the fan up. And I am going to give it a quick test. Okay. And this is definitely a process where I highly recommend. It's off. Okay. Testing at every step. Like, get in there, look at your work, make sure nothing's bridged. Like, take your time. Oh, I turned off the TV that's out of frame here. And. Of course, it's going to be... Oh, no, there it is. Okay, good. Swiss came up. Turn that off before... That's pretty warm. Okay. So, the next step is putting the heatsink back on. Now, I ordered... I don't remember where I put the package. A pack on Amazon that was just a bunch of thermal pads. They come in a variety of thicknesses. There are sources online, because I now do not remember which thickness is which. There are 3 thicknesses that it needs, and because each of these 3 sets of chips, they're a different thickness, but the heatsink is one set of thickness. So you need different thicknesses of the heat pad to go on each thing. So what I did is I take a little X-Acto knife and I just kind of mark where I'm going to cut by pushing down into it on there. The last one I must have cut extra too large. Okay, so then now it's just going to be a cut. Now, if you don't cut all the way through, you can very easily just, you have to have cut through that though. Why is that being difficult? That was odd. Okay. Boom. And then that goes right on there. I'm going to leave the other layer of film on it. That can go off to the side. This must be, yep. Okay. Do the same thing with this one. Do a little bit extra. Now, because I'm doing these for myself, I'm not being super exact and pretty with the cuts. If I was doing this for someone else, I might actually, you know, not have them look so like that. I might, you know, take the extra few minutes and try and cut it actually square. You know, go that extra mile, but you know, I barely want to do this kind of stuff for myself. I am not I am not going to do it for anybody else. That goes on there. So I do remember for sure that the heat pad that goes over the memory modules is the thinnest one because they are super extra thick. And there you go. Okay, so then a trick that I have found with these is to get this last piece of film off, put a finger on there and just try to catch the edge of the film. And sometimes it's difficult. And off it comes. Boom. If you try to do it other ways, what I found is the whole thing just keeps wanting to peel up, and you're like, no, just the film, but like keeping some pressure down on it to keep the squishy part on the heatsink, and then catch just the finest edge with the tweezers, and it goes off pretty easy. Now, the one other thing I'm going to do, because I'm nervous, and ideally this should be Kapton tape, but I don't have any. I'm going to do a similar trick here with a little bit of electrical tape. I get a little bit of anxiety about this heatsink and these bit of extra wire and solder blob on there. Now this one wasn't too bad, so I might not have that same anxiety about that one, but on all the other three, this bit of solder here was it was thick with at least 2 C's, if you know what I mean. Which would be weird because I'm not sure that I know what I mean. Now, line these up as best you can. There are 6 screws on this. What I do whenever I'm putting screws into anything like this, I'm going to put very loosely, put one in the 2 opposite corners so that it still has a little bit of wiggle room. And these are machine screws, so you little turkey. These are machined screws that are going into, why is that being difficult? It felt like it was grabbing. Okay, there it grabbed. Anyway, so you want them, so you don't have to do the trick of going backwards to make sure that it's going into the same hole. But you don't want to tighten the first few, and honestly, I don't really tighten any of them until I've gotten all of them in. You don't want to tighten the first few, because if you tighten it down, then you might not be able to move it, and if all the holes aren't lined up, you get it to a point where it's like, oh, I can't get this last screw in because the freaking holes aren't aren't lined up. And then you have to go back and loosen them. You know, it's a case where it's definitely easier to just do it right the first time. And then go back and tighten them. And don't want to tighten these down, I don't think, a super lot, just until it kind of starts to resist a bit. There. Okay. Now, Swiss will yell at you. If there's no optical drive, it'll say, "Ah, no optical drive." Now, I'm gonna try to gather all these wires together. I'm gonna route them through this little notch right here, like that. Kind of set that down very carefully. Okay, this all looks good. Oh shoot, and I didn't blow that side out because this is still super dirty. Hold on, let me do that. Okay. All right. So, kind of thread those through the gap into there. It looks good. And then pressing back here, there, until it actually, like, there's a connector in there until it actually makes connection. Now that seems good. And it can go down all the way. Set that up. Okay, now we can turn it on again. Yay, it looks good. Okay. Now, the rest of the reassembly is just doing all of the other stuff back in reverse. The one thing I haven't quite decided, though, I want to get one of these tops. The top for this is figure out, I'll unplug this while I'm messing about with it, is where exactly, so I think this needs to get, where does this need to go in? Like here? Let's see how this all fits. Like that? I don't like that. I don't like that for sure. Yeah, I think it just needs to get tucked in like right here. I think that's the only place where there's space. And that'll go down like that. Doesn't seem like it closes. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Yeah, that seems... Let me zoom out the rest of the way. That seems good. Okay. All right, that seems right. So I'll take that back off. And now it's time to just reattach 437 screws. This has been a project. Bring all these screws back over. Hopefully when it's all said and done and everything's together and I get everyone together to actually use these things, it will be worth it. Right now it has just felt super frustrating. Now all these are just going into plastic, so you do want to do the trick of go backwards a little bit until you kind of feel it click. Although this one's not really lined up right. Backwards until you feel it click. Oh, this one's being super difficult. All right, try a different hole. To show this, and I may end up. You kind of feel it settle into place. I said you'll feel it settle. Are there different screws here and I just did not pay adequate attention? Those all look the same. There it goes. Okay. I guess I was just doing it wrong. Now, on this one, it's important to put just the middle three in because the outer two hold the fan assembly on. When I put the couple screws in the other one, the one that I did put a couple screws into, I didn't do that, and I went to put the fan assembly on after having put a screw into that one, and it wouldn't fit, and I felt very silly. Now, I washed this in the sink because it was super dirty and it's still really scratched up and not pretty, and the filter comes out. The filter, so I'm assuming that the fan must, I didn't really check it, I'm assuming that the fan must blow out because the filter goes on the side opposite the fan, which is a little bit counterintuitive to me. But if the fan is pulling air in across that way, which is what it must be doing, that would make sense. Oh, I forgot something. I forgot these. And I don't actually remember which way these were facing now. They were facing that way. How am I going to get these in? Oh, wait, I can... They must... Oh, there are guides. They must have been facing that way because that's the way they fit. Okay. I'm glad that I noticed the pile of those sitting there. Now, and that, then... Shoot. Well, so that's a thing that I have now just learned, is that this causes some difficulties. Huh. Well, I think what I'm going to do... what am I going to do? Because I don't know anywhere else to route... any other way to route those wires except through there, above the memory card slot. So I think I am going to just attach it with one screw, and then I don't know how I feel about that. Attach this with one screw because I can't get... Alright, let's see if I loosen this, can I... Is there anything else I can do? Is there any way I can move those around so I can get that other screw in? Yes, I can. There. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just move that so that I can get the screw in, but I'm not going to tighten it down super tight. That seems the best. Put in just a little bit. I can tighten this other side down. Tighten that just a little bit. Okay, that looks good. All right, it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, and then that should be it. Put the top back on. And these are also going into plastic, so they should be, go backwards and then forwards. And I do have the bottom cover for this. It's going to go on a Game Boy player, so I have all the bottom covers for these in a zip top bag in a tub somewhere, and boom, there we go. Oh, and there's a nice cat hair right there. Let me pull that out. Okay, now let's check and make sure it still works, because boy howdy would that be frustrating. Okay, so it boots into normal GameCube stuff and boots into Swiss. All right, perfect. All right, I'm going to put the rest of these back together off camera. I'm not going to, even I think fast forwarding at this point, putting all the rest of them together is going to be super boring. There is going to be a follow-up video to this where I show why I wanted to mod 4 of these and what I'm doing with them. There, as I hopefully mentioned in the intro, there will also be a live stream. So this video should hopefully be published on either Friday the 17th or Saturday the 18th. My live stream, which will be on Twitch, I will put all the information in the description below, will be Sunday, 2 p.m., November 19th. I will put some highlights from that live stream in a video where I'm going to talk more about the rest of the setup of this and how all these are going to be configured and how everything else is going to be set up and put together. There will be another video if you can't make the live stream where there will be the payoff. At least it's going to be the payoff for me, damn it. If you have enjoyed watching me flail around with the solder and burn myself a couple of times, I would really appreciate you clicking the like button. If you are interested in seeing any of that future GameCube content or any of the other computer-related content that I have coming up, please click the subscribe button. And until next time, try to remember the good stuff.